Hey all, welcome back to Make More Bonsai. John here. Let's finally get into the question of how was this bonsai transformed from a San Jose Juniper to a Kishu Shimpaku Juniper? This leads us into a little discussion about how and why approach grafting was used to get this old bonsai to the state that it is currently in. There are lots of reasons to perform a graft. For bonsai, grafting is really used to improve the aesthetic value of the tree. One can graft a branch onto a tree exactly where you want it to improve the design. Another reason is to replace the foliage of the rootstock to one that is better and more suited for bonsai. Often the rootstock is more hardy and resilient than the stock being grafted onto it. Once grafted, the less resilient scion gets the opportunity to take advantage of the strength the rootstock has to offer. It becomes more hardy because it receives more resources than it were if it were still attached to its original roots. There are a few different ways to graft. One can attach a bud onto the rootstock or a small section of a branch. This type of grafting has risks in that the scion may not fully attach before losing all of its moisture since it's cut from its roots. This can lead to failure, which is bad times. There is another method that increases the odds of success greatly called approach grafting. An approach graft keeps the desired graft scion attached to its roots, eliminating the risk of it drying up before the graft union takes place. It can also be performed at any time, but preferably when the trees are actively growing. Generally, you should use the same species when performing a graft. Stray too far away from the same species and the results will most likely be weak or unsuccessful. In this case, the species is the same, Juniperus chinensis, so let's check that box. The choice of Juniperus chinensis Kishu, aka Shimpaku, is being used for the foliage stock, and Juniperus chinensis San Jose is used for the rootstock. Shimpaku is a popular foliage style for bonsai because it is very fine, it has dense scaly growth, and responds well to pruning and training. The San Jose foliage is a bit larger and more coarse. It's actually fine on its own, but the bonsai needs to be kinda large for the foliage to fit well proportionally. On a smaller tree, it can be kind of loose and less compact. The San Jose has some really useful properties as a rootstock for grafting. Its roots are stronger and thicker. They move and hold more water and circulate nutrients faster and more efficiently than the Shimpaku. And this creates a very attractive wide trunk, which is great for bonsai. Combining the strong roots and efficient circulation of the San Jose with the foliage aesthetic of the Shimpaku, and we are checking a lot of boxes on the awesome bonsai checklist. There is a downside to grafting to consider. Occasionally, the ultra-strong rootstock can outgrow the scion over time, creating an unsightly bulge at the site of the graft union. Over time, this may sever the graft scion, and then the graft fails once they are no longer connected. This can also lead to bad times. The good news is, it seems the San Jose and the Shimpaku, they don't suffer from that too much. There is a bulge at the graft union, but over time it becomes more and more difficult to see as the tree grows. Once the Shimpaku gets the boost from the San Jose, it takes on extra resources and keeps up with the San Jose's growth pattern, and the San Jose, energized by more sugars from the foliage density of the Shimpaku, gains strength and momentum as well, which really combines into a strong and resilient bonsai. That, my friend, leads to good times. Here's an example of a grafted Shimpaku San Jose combo just 2 years after a complete union. The original graft was about 3 or 4 inches long. After 2 years, it has taken on the extra resources the rootstock offers and has grown out 2 to 3 times faster than if it were not grafted. That new trunk develops quickly, as well as the new branches. Personally, I like to keep it simple and work toward just replacing the foliage stock at the trunk level. You can replace the foliage on branches if you wish, but there will always be a bit of a bulge and a risk of bending that branch at that weak point where the union is and separating it. This is sometimes performed on ancient collected specimens and is an option when you want to preserve structural aspects of that specimen. If things get out of hand, however, you would need to start over years later, but that is sometimes what it takes when working with these ancient collected specimens. In this case, however, we're creating a bonsai from raw stock. We may as well work toward a successful, trouble-free design. Why do I keep showing you this San Jose Juniper that's growing in the ground? We're going to perform an approach graft on this tree so you can see just how easy this is. I have it planted in the ground because it will grow and develop much faster than if it were in a pot. It's planted with the desired back of the bonsai facing out to make the grafting process easy. When doing this, choose which side will be the front so the graft union will always remain hidden. This way, in case the graft union becomes all bumpy and weird looking, it will remain invisible. We want to hide any flaws when creating bonsai. With a sharp knife, clean the area and cut deep into the trunk to expose the cambium layer. Make that cut the width of the scion stock you wish to graft onto the trunk. It is very important to ensure the cambium layers of the rootstock and the foliage stock match as much as possible so they touch and connect together in a union. If they are not close enough to make contact, the areas will simply callus and heal over without forming a union. If that happens, you'll have to try again, so take your time, it'll be time well spent. Also, if possible, see if you can arrange the two so the scion stock rests inside of the trunk stock. This will level the surface and help create a less visible union and bulge. That union will rest securely within the trunk, and when it's all healed over, it'll be very strong and will reduce the risk of it separating. If you do this well, you'll find it difficult to even see the union after 5 or so years. Once you're satisfied that they all fit together, it's time to firmly attach them in a way that will prevent any movement. Secure the bottom with some aluminum wire. Check to see if the cambium still matches occasionally as you tighten the wire. Don't make the wire too tight, just tight enough to keep the scion motionless. If you make it too tight, you can dent the rootstock. The goal is not to let the wire cut into the tree, just hold the stock steady. Next, do the same on the top of the graft site, remembering that this is just to hold it in place firmly without damaging the stock. If you were to press down on the graft site, it should not move at all. Finally, seal the area to prevent moisture loss. I'm using bonsai cut paste, but you can use grafting wax as well. That's all there is to it. Water and fertilize and wait. This will take really about 9 months to 1 year before you'll be able to remove the paste or wax to see if the union was complete. If it looks like the bond has been successful, carefully loosen the top wire and see if the union is solid. You'll know immediately if it's bonded. If the graft did not take, it will separate easily and the callus will have closed up the cut. If the bond is successful, now comes the really hard part. You'll need to be patient to see if the new graft begins to grow. I prefer to wait until I see another 4 to 6 inches on the grafted stock before I separate it from its original roots. During that time, be sure to leave the original foliage on the rootstock. You can prune it to allow more light to get into the graft site, but it is important to leave it alone for maybe another year. This is to keep vascular activity flowing throughout the tree. This will strengthen the new foliage and prepare it to take over as the main source of sugar and photosynthesis. When the time comes to remove the old foliage, do this in stages spread out over a few months, allowing the new stock to acquire new foliage to replace what is removed. By the time you've completely removed the old San Jose foliage, the new Shimpaku foliage will have gotten strong and be growing fast. Once the tree is completely converted, after another year, the advantages of the San Jose rootstock really start to show. The Shimpaku graft will be growing almost twice as fast as if it were left on its original roots. Make sure it's healthy before beginning any styling or wiring. Here's an example of another graft in progress to give you an idea of how funky things can get while patiently waiting for nature to do its thing. For a while, things will look like some weird science project. Look at this Frankenstein-y monster. Notice how that pot is secured to make sure that it doesn't move. That's really important with these grafts. Bonsai can really be a combo of the good, the bad, and the ugly at times. But this peek behind the curtain is maybe necessary to help folks gain a more fulfilling experience as you grow and gain confidence with your own trees, experimenting with what works for you and what work goes into creating these ever-changing little works of art. We most often see the end results, which is great, but to experience this exercise in precision, patience, and working alongside as a partner with the tree's development is part of the allure and process of becoming that end result that we see. It can lead to a really satisfying feeling of accomplishment at whatever level you may be in your bonsai journey. We have now walked through a couple of techniques used to reach this point in this little bonsai's development. Lots of horticulture and helping of aesthetic improvement. And to think, we haven't even started wiring and styling. That will have to wait until summer, which will be here before you know it. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you're seeing here, please don't forget to like and comment because I love to hear from you, and subscribe.